Morning, you guys. I hope you guys are all having a fantastic day wherever you are. The sun is shining, the birds are chirping, and it's another day. So I'm a little bit late with this video, but I wanted to speak a little bit about the Bitcoin halving and just explain why it's an important event and what it means for Bitcoin and why Bitcoin has so much value in my eyes moving forward. So we have what's called quantitative easing and inflation. So what that is when the government increases the money supply. So let's say there's an economic crisis and they don't want to deal with it. They don't want these businesses to go bankrupt, the businesses that made bad business choices and that should suffer the consequences. They don't want to go through that. So what they do is they create money out of thin air, and they'll subsidize these businesses or bail them out, or they'll loan them more money in the form of debt. And they basically create this money out of thin air, and then they keep the whole thing going. And every time they add to the money supply or the amount of money in circulation, that creates inflation. So for easy math, let's say they doubled the money supply. Let's say there was $1 trillion in an economy and it was circulating, and they came in and they doubled that. Now there's 2 trillion. What that would do is now there's double the amount of money in circulation, but there's still the same amount of goods and services and assets. So people holding those assets will charge double for them because now there's double the amount of the currency in circulation, but the same amount of goods and services. So every time they add to the money supply, it devalues or it decreases the purchasing power of those dollars. And that's very important for us to understand because we're all busy working for these government currencies. We're hustling, we're giving our time, our energy, our innovation for Canadian dollars, US dollars, etc. And in the meantime, they just create it out of thin air. They don't have to work for it. And then they come in and they buy the assets with it. And every time they create more of it out of thin air, it devalues the purchasing power. So we're so busy working and hustling to save our money and try and get ahead, but every time they do this, the purchasing power is decreasing. So things get more and more expensive. And to the unsavvy person that doesn't understand finance, they just think that things are getting more expensive and that the values are increasing. So people are buying real estate because they think, oh wow, look at real estate prices, they're going up, it must be a great investment. It's not that the value of the homes are going up, it's that the purchasing power of your dollars are actually decreasing. So people are charging more of that underlying currency for the asset. So it's actually that the purchasing power of your dollars are decreasing. And now that's a very important thing because who wants to be working and saving in these currencies when the governments are just devaluing them? And this is what they call quantitative easing. It's a fancy name they've made up for basically creating money out of thin air and robbing our wealth and devaluing these currencies. And basically what it means is they're easing the money supply. So they're increasing the total amount of supply so it's easier to get. And then they pump it into the system in the form of debt. Usually they give out loans. So they create it out of thin air and then they loan it to the main banks with interest. So let's say they create $1 trillion, then they loan it out with 1% interest. Now there's $1.1 trillion owed, and then those banks lend it out to the people at 3% interest. So now they pump in $1 trillion, but now there's $1.4 trillion owed. So there's actually only $1 trillion in circulation, but there's $1.4 trillion owed. So there's never actually physically enough money in circulation to pay that debt down. So what it does is it enslaves the people because everyone's busy trying to get out of debt, but there's actually not physically enough money to ever get out of debt. So every time they increase the money supply and pump it into the system in the form of debt, it basically creates more debt slaves and it enslaves the people and it keeps people working and keeps them basically slaves to these rich elite that don't actually have to work for the money. They just create it out of thin air. And then we're so busy giving our time and our energy and our labor to get these dollars. So it's really not a fair system. And Bitcoin gets around that because what its protocol or its algorithm, the way it's designed, is that it has monetary tightening. So every 4 years, the amount of new Bitcoin that gets created on an annual basis gets cut in half. So this is great because as demand increases, the supply is actually decreasing. So there's less and less Bitcoin being created. And right now, all the governments around the world are quantitative easing. So they're all creating more currency, trying to get us out of this economic crisis. But what it's doing is it's destroying the purchasing power of all these dollars. So it's basically knocking out the middle class, and it's making everyone poor, essentially, because their dollars that they're so busy working for are losing their purchasing power. Bitcoin gets around this. It's the only currency in the world that actually has a quantitative tightening policy where there's less and less of the currency moving forward. All the other governments are increasing their supply, which is devaluing it, and Bitcoin is decreasing the supply, which increases its value. So this is why it's really important. And this is the event that took place yesterday. It happens every 4 years. And it's a great thing for those that are holding Bitcoin, because Bitcoin just got that much harder to get. There's less of it now in being created every day. So when there's less of it being created, the only way to get it is to buy it from somebody that already has it. And when price starts increasing, those that hold it don't want to get rid of it. So this is by design a fantastic thing for a currency. And if we look at something like gold, gold has held its value really well, because to increase the supply of gold, you need to go out and mine it, physically pull it out of the ground. And you can't just come in and easily double the money supply of gold. You actually have to go mine it. And when we ramped up production to the highest we've ever seen, the total amount of inflation we had in the gold supply in 1 year was 2.7%. So it has a really low annual inflation rate. And that's why it has far outperformed government currencies in the long run. If you look back at the charts, it wasn't long ago that gold was only $300 an ounce, and now we're at $1,700 in US dollars. And if you look at something like the Canadian dollar that's in big trouble, we're already at $2,500 for 1 ounce of gold, when only 20 years ago you could have bought it for about $500. So you can see how the government currencies are continually devaluing, and stuff with a set inflation or a lower inflation level like gold far outperforms, because there's no way for them to come in and counterfeit it or increase the supply of it drastically in a short amount of time. So that is why gold has outperformed, and that is why many of us believe Bitcoin will far outperform these government currencies moving forward, as they all increase their supplies to try and deal with this economic crisis. And something like Bitcoin with a policy of economic tightening will far outperform, because it'll be harder and harder to get Bitcoin. There's only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoin. So as the demand increases, there's less of it available. Therefore, the value of it will increase. So that's just a quick overview of what the halving is. It basically means the annual supply got cut in half. And it went from 3.9% inflation, annual inflation, and it got cut in half to about 1.7% inflation. So Bitcoin just became the hardest money ever created. Its annual inflation is now less than that of gold, and it is far less than all of these government currencies, as they're all printing their way into oblivion right now and increasing the money supplies like crazy and indebting everyone. So that is a key factor in Bitcoin. That is why Bitcoin is set to increase in value in many people's view. That is something many of us love about Bitcoin. Its set inflation schedule and its quantitative tightening properties. So that's just a quick overview, guys. I hope that makes sense. Please comment down below. Let me know what you think. I hope you guys are all learning about Bitcoin, seeing its importance, and potentially getting your hands on a little bit. it is still a speculative asset and has a lot of risk. So never invest money that you're not willing to lose, but it is a once in a lifetime opportunity to invest in this emerging asset class. So with that being said, I'll leave it at that. I hope you guys all have a fantastic day. Thank you so much for watching the video. Take care and enjoy the lovely sunshine.